Okay, welcome to our faculty guide and semester at a glance for documentary and narrative film projects. Just to give you a quick overview, this is for possible video projects, and this session is for faculty who are trying to better understand options for a project and how it would fit into your course planning and objectives. As I walk you through this, I will toggle between some guiding principles for you to consider as you plan your course, and I will also be introducing some slides that I give as I introduce the project to the students in class. I won't be going very in-depth on those particular slides as I normally would in class, but I do want to just give a visual so you might have a better understanding of what your students would be seeing in some of our in-class sessions. But we are able to customize this completely. A video project can be very simple with just a few images and a basic narration over it, or it could be much more in-depth with students shooting their own footage and interviewing people. So don't be intimidated by the options. We will work with you to find the right fit for your class and expectations. So there might be elements in this session that are not relevant for what you would be doing, so don't worry about that at all. This is something that I show a lot of the times in classes, and it's just to help students think about how they approach their topic. I always start with, don't start with the first paragraph of the Wikipedia entry on whatever your topic is. Of course, it's probably factual, but is it engaging? And so thinking about storytelling and that each topic that you're going to be creating a video for has some sort of story element. And although data and a lot of the research elements are extremely important, also finding the stories that captivate and connect us as humans are extremely helpful when we're thinking about all the different elements that we're going to be putting into our project. So often faculty are wondering, how much technology is going to be in a class and what our students are able to get out of a video project, similar to a standard research paper. So at its core, obviously, this is a research project. It's coming up with a concept and it's doing in-depth research. The difference is that a lot of, or an additional element to that is visual. So being able to make connections with visual cues can help connect in memory and allow students to have a deeper understanding of some of the concepts that they're researching and trying to think through. And a creative challenge with that is with the moving images and sound, they're thinking more about audience. Not that they aren't with a paper, but as they watch videos, they often are noticing what inspires them to continue watching or what engages them and what doesn't. So some of the research skills, collaborative working when you're working in a group project, and then problem solving, technology, and trying to organize your concepts. So same thing with a standard paper, but also we do discuss that sometimes it wouldn't follow the exact same flow as a standard research paper. So you might lead with something that wouldn't necessarily make sense in a paper, but it captivates an audience. So really keeping the audience in mind is a critical element in this process. And again, our students are digging deeply into a lot of these concepts, so they are going to be working through footage and piecing it together continually. And so as they do this, it's again looking at the same thing over and over again, and not only looking at what they are going to be using, but thinking about what they aren't going to be using. So the students have to actively view other video samples when they're thinking of maybe gathering footage or images elsewhere, and thinking about what is the core element that they can extract from a video. And again, it's just like when they're trying to extract quotes and passages from readings, that they have to be concise and they have to have a small portion. So they can't use a full interview 1-minute segment. They still need to find a 15 to 20-second clip and then bridge that with their own understanding and their own analysis and context. And so the whole goal is to obviously have our students engaged and active in their learning and research process. So by allowing them to have some creative movement, they hopefully will have a bit more motivation to tell their story and have a enhanced learning experience. Again, I said that there were some additional elements that might be taken in, for instance, interviews. So thinking about what each project has available as options. Some projects are very straightforward and it follows a particular template of sorts, and other ones are much more fluid and allow students to work through the process and have different elements. So again, working with groups, interviewing people, learning how to talk with people outside of their class and feel comfortable, and then taking that information back and crafting and engaging an informative narrative is all part of this process. So the basic documentary process for class here, again, starting with the research, then writing our script, building some sort of storyboard with sounds, really starting to think about how those two elements, and images for that matter, come together, and then doing the recording. This is a slide that I use in classes. And this is to think about how we will present it in class in general. So some of this might be you introducing it into the class in before I would even come in for a session. So some faculty bring up the initial discussion about the assignment or what the research topic would be before I come in. So then, and sometimes they even have the students know what their topic would be. So then when I come in later for a session on pre-production planning and thinking about looking at examples and thinking through how you would engage the audience, they already have a topic in mind. It's not required, but sometimes it does help them start thinking and brainstorming in that first session with me if they do have some sort of idea of what they're possibly going to be talking about. So again, during the concept development, I might come in and do interview skills to discuss both how to interview, but also how to interview with technology to ensure that you don't have overlapping sounds, and how to be attentive. Writing, narration, and production planning. Another session would be coming in for the equipment training itself. So again, some classes require no equipment training, but if students are going to be out capturing either interviews or their own footage, that would be something that would be helpful. Then after they have some sort of footage editing software, so an in-class iMovie session, and then finally the finalizing process. So it could be an in-class critiques, and I'll go further into depth with this later. And also finalizing could be one-on-one feedback with you. It could also be an open work session with the whole class, and I'm there to assist with technological and also just best practices and guidance. So these are a few of the options when you're thinking of grading elements. So again, I do understand that there's the concern of the technological expertise and not trying to weigh that too much, but it does have to be part of the process. So content, quality, and extensiveness of research is number one, and we'll go into a rubric in a second. The delivery, how prepared they were, both with the writing of the script, and then also how much effort they put into the narration and the engagement of their voice, or the selection of clips from elsewhere or interviews. The narrative, how they present it in a compelling, interesting way, and thinking about bringing something new to the topic. So if I could watch a video that is pretty much the same as what they've already produced, that doesn't seem extremely compelling, but thinking of how they've brought their own focus, new analysis or concepts, or bridging things together in a creative way. Relevance helps with the clarity and authority, and also, again, thinking of how they connect with other people or with the audience, and trying to think through how they are engaging with the topics in the course, and making sure that the the expectations of the faculty member and the use of what you've worked through in class already connect. The technical, again, I'll go through on the rubric in a second, but there does have to be some sort of expectation on the technology. Can we hear what they're saying? Have they put music over top that we can't hear that? Did they record in a room that's extremely echoey? If they're putting images up, for instance, graphs or a map, have they put up a high quality image so you can see the detail? A lot of those things are very easy to change, and they can make a project much more effective. But if they don't put that effort in, it really can take away from the success and effectiveness of the project. And then group work, if you choose to do group work, making sure that you are able to evaluate each student's addition to the project. So again, for group projects, you can decide if they self-create groups or you assign them, and thinking through, maybe some of the pitfalls or successes, for that matter, in advance is helpful. Select roles. So trying to think about if everyone has a defined role. I have had faculty who know that, someone in class is really great at the technological, but at the same time, everyone does need to be bringing forth the research and the content. So I think that that's going to be extremely critical to ensure that everyone has produced something that is based on the content of the class and the topic at hand, and that someone isn't only focused on the technological because they're really great at editing. So outlining that and ensuring that everyone has an expectation and it aligns with your expectations is going to be important. Again, we've talked a little bit about critiques. Having a group critique of other works in progress can be extremely helpful. First, seeing what other students are already working on, and asking questions. So it doesn't have to be a very large investment in time, but for larger group or larger projects, especially group projects, it is helpful. So if it's a 5 to 8 minute video project, just asking them to bring 1 minute. So it brings both insight, and you can sort of see where they grow from the 1 minute to the final project, but it also requires them to touch the technology. And what that does is it helps them sort of stumble through any of the technological hurdles that they might have early, rather than waiting until the final project is due and then they have they've encountered these things. So they can figure out that the microphone doesn't sound the way they need it to, or things like that. And so the in-class critique and requiring them to bring forward a draft would be extremely helpful. So group evaluations, also thinking about how you are going to evaluate the group, and giving the students an opportunity to have a private conversation with you, or some sort of survey, but something that they can give their opinion and viewpoint on how the project worked without doing it necessarily all in front of the other group members. So this is a sample rubric. I know it's small. We can send this out in a document so you can read it better. But the idea is all of those different elements, content on this one, it's 50% of the grade. So really, I mean, that's a critical part of this, is that to ensure that the students have put the effort in, that they've had a well-researched topic, they've thought thoroughly, they have many different connections to different places where they've researched. They are using expert testimony, they're using different forms of evidence, and how they're all pulling that together. This one was specific to a particular course, but again, like relevance to themes that were in the course itself and how it connects. So so it's the content itself, but then also how is the content completely outside of what you were discussing in class, or have they tied those elements in? The delivery, again, the organization and flow. So is it compelling? Is it interesting? Are they interested in what they're speaking about? Have they prepared? If they're stumbling through their narration, did they, if they didn't do that, or if they didn't prepare well, they should have been able to re-record it and then have it come through much more with a better flow. And so those are abilities that you can use our podcast room for. And so being able to take the time to make the most engaging delivery. And the technical polish, so this again is just understanding the control of the technology itself. So any of the small hiccups, sounds, visual glitches, or anything like that, or if it just seems sort of choppy and it seems like they threw things together. And then wow factor for this one, they gave 10%. That doesn't necessarily have to. You can change, obviously you can change the percentages, but just that, maybe it was just so polished and clean and just everything just sort of came together in a way that was just overwhelmingly positive. So thinking about how you would maybe weigh that, or if you don't want the wow factor, choosing to maybe put a higher percentage on one of the other areas. So organizing the process, this is a slide that I show for students, and this is, again, just walking us through sort of what we talked a little bit before, visualizing and brainstorming, writing the narration, thinking about the visuals, recording the audio, and editing. Like those are the basic steps of it, and taking it in a bite-sized, steps, then we are able to have them focus on each one of these things individually instead of overwhelming them and trying to, pull it all together all at once. So tips for writing narration, keep it conversational, trying to engage the audience as you would if you were just talking to someone and trying to make someone care about this particular topic. Condensed words, although, I think sometimes in papers they might use different terminology or different ways of writing. When you're actually speaking it, thinking about how it does flow and how, what your delivery is. Keeping the tone consistent, and that, so thinking about, is this a very deep and heavy topic, and are you keeping that sort of feel, or are you trying to educate someone and trying to be lighthearted and think about how you're trying to change someone's choices, and so thinking about the tone of your delivery, the tone of your writing, what point of view are you taking? Again, maybe not skewing. I mean, you can give different perspectives, of course, but just sort of keeping that consistent. This goes, using action verbs kind of goes back to that first slide of the science of storytelling, of thinking of how you are writing and how you're engaging. And using terms like that can engage our brains in a different way. And of course, read it aloud, and that's what I said before. If students have recorded and they aren't prepared, it will sound very choppy, and you will know that that's the first time that they read it. But if they've read it multiple times, it will come through. Planning for a project, goals, and impact. So these are just a couple things that the students need to work through. So what does the audience need to receive? How do you, and these are questions that we'll ask the students, how do you want your audience to feel? What is the goal of the project? What should the audience know or want to do after viewing? Again, like what are you asking them to do? And what do you want the tone to be? So these are things that we'll talk about. I'm not going to go very deep into this, but this is what I do bring up in class. So again, looking at this as a story, and so it doesn't mean that you're following the same character. I mean, a character could be the government, a character could be a tree, a character could be any number of different things or concepts, but the idea that you are walking through your documentary or your narrative film, and you are thinking about where you're starting. So, and so I like to say, listen carefully to how you and your friends tell stories to one another. You'll notice all three acts. And then again, so we just parse through, and so again, trying to think about how you start. What are you opening with? Be dramatic, unique, surprising, and have them compelled so they will want to continue. And again, you know, it's looking through the confrontation. What are we raising the stakes? What are we up against? And all of these things do seem like real life, so you want it to feel authentic. And then, of course, you know, ending it well, but with this, you know, plan with the end in mind, know where you're going. So what are you going to be asking your audience? What are you hoping that they leave with? And if you have that in mind from the beginning, then you're able to build your story a little bit further. And again, you know, with the story, thinking about how you build tension or how you build interest, and not revealing the climax of the story too early, so that you do keep your audience interested and walking through. Obviously, a video project is a visual project. So thinking of, this is the life formula. So thinking of what you start with, what's the first image. So these are some things that we talk about in class, like what kinds of portraits, you know, you're using, what is the sequence of progression, and walking through all of these. So when they have a narration, when they have a draft script, they're thinking about the different imagery that they're going to be adding in, and where you start and where you end, and how you build that visual narrative, and what goes first, and which images you choose. Not just searching for your topic and picking the first 5 Google images is not the way that you are going to be building a compelling story. So this, again, for students, we're going to be talking about writing a draft or treatment, and so thinking of the sound bites you hope to get. This is for more of an interview. Determine the narrators. So thinking again about interviewing. Is it you? Is your voice the narration, or are you interviewing folks? And then plan for optional topic coverage. So thinking of other topics that you might want to add in that align with the overarching topic. This is the classic storyboard. I actually don't really highlight this too much, but you know, thinking about the images that you want to look at. You want to convey, that you might need to either shoot yourself or search for on the internet, and then the either direct narration or the basic concept of what will be spoken. This is more along the lines of what I talk about, and that all it is a shot list and narration. So one column is a general idea of what the image is, and then the narration. So a portrait of Cesar Chavez. So that could be any number of ones. I mean, is it an up close? Is it, you know, him in a field? And so thinking about, you know, then the direction that the student director would be choosing for that. So thinking of some general concepts, and then they can start to go out and look for the images themselves. And again, the narration is here, so completely broken up. And aligned with a general image or video. Okay, we're going to go, again, this is what I will go over, so I'm going to kind of go through these pretty fast, but, you know, if we are teaching students how to shoot, giving them the guidance on how to do that. Talking about the different types of shots and how this is that visual variety, you know, the life model, looking at the different types of images we're going to create. Some basic framing for video, trying to get the best shot. Again, you're not necessarily going to be grading on all of these elements, but if the students are thinking about it when they're talking to someone, and they're trying to capture the person in the best light and giving them the best setup for an interview, that's also extremely crucial. Again, so this is just, let's compare what's wrong with one, what's better on the other. Students will always, do the best that they can, and some will be more successful than others, but at least discussing it. And again, I'm not going to go deep into the interview, but this is what I will talk about in class. So again, being prepared and researching, coming in with interview questions, sending them to the interviewee in advance, being prepared for interview techniques so you feel comfortable, and ensuring that you know your audio and video gear and you've prepped it. So you one of the most crucial things that I always talk about is that the students need to make sure that they don't waste someone's time. So they need to make sure that they have recorded this properly, because you can never go back to an interviewee and say, I'm sorry, we need to do that again because I didn't actually record it. So the skills you need to get the information you want on the subject, and then the recording skills to ensure that you have everything that you need. Pre-interview, discussing the relationship, especially if it's not someone you know, making sure you know the goal of the project, and the subject also knows, and breaking down each segment of content, outline the structure of the conversation you'd like to have with the person. These are just, again, like some basic concepts, like making sure that you get the best, you set it up so that the interviewee gives you the best information as possible. And this one is also critical because of the technology. I'm a definitely aha-er, and students are too. You want to give that, not, that expectation that you're listening, but having to do that in a quiet, silent way is going to be important. Again, just thinking of the story. So these are things that I would be talking about in class. And then this is for any of the projects, but also for an interview, the idea of B-roll, like what are the other images? So if you're interviewing me and I'm talking about my garden, having images of my garden, and they cut away while I'm still discussing it. So thinking about those images, if they're doing an interview, are there things that they need to capture when they're in that space with that person? If they're at someone's house, what's on their refrigerator door? Like that's an interesting one. So thinking about those types of things. So again, we have media equipment and software. So these are some things that we would cover, but a lot of times we don't need all of this. I mean, but for a larger project that students are going to be interviewing or maybe going out and getting footage, some students are going on field trips and they need to capture things while they're on location. So we work with the students, we work with you, so you don't have to necessarily know what exactly they need, but we'll figure out where they're going and what's the best what's important. For an interview class, we have had setups that they all come in and they all kind of interview each other, so they get, in the hot seat and they feel comfortable with that. That can be something that we do as well. We do talk about apps for devices, since this is something that we're working on now, with being remote. And so in general, a lot of what I just showed were things that we are talking about in class, or things that I will convey to the students in class in a much more in-depth way, as well as partnering with you to find examples. A lot of times I have student examples from other semesters to play for the students, so they have a visual of what we think that they're capable of creating, and we think that they're pretty exemplary examples. But this is a quick look at our semester working with academic technology. So we start out with the faculty consultation with your liaison, share a syllabus or draft assignment. We're going to look at what you expect the final grade to be, and then try to align the final project. So, I mean, we never assign a 15-minute video. I mean, at most it's 10, and that's a pretty high percentage of the final grade. But it could just be a 1-minute, one-off project as well. So it can be a totally different scope and size depending on what your project really is. Then looking at the semester schedule, so when we have this consultation, hopefully we come out of it within either that session or within a day or two, looking at calendars. So how much time can you devote to in-class sessions? And that also is critical. So if you want a 10-minute project, but you can't give any class time for us to come in, that's not going to set it up for a very successful final project. So we do need to make sure that we do have enough touch points with the class to ensure that they feel comfortable and supported in this process. So recommended in-class session, like I said, it varies depending on size and scope of project, but definitely the intro, best practices, examples viewing. It doesn't have to be a full class. It can be 20 minutes, 30 minutes even, but really looking at how they approach it, thinking about audience, looking at some examples, and really just sort of brainstorming and then thinking about that concept. Then coming in and doing a video editing training, actually also in there could be an equipment training as well, depending. Sometimes they're coupled together, but a lot of times they're smaller ones. So these don't always have to be taking over an entire class. The video editing usually is a for a 50-minute class session. We also, for larger projects, have a 1-minute draft, or maybe 30 seconds to whatever your small portion would be. And again, works pretty well for group projects to ensure that everyone's participating up front, making sure that you can identify if there's any concerns at that point. Sometimes we have an open lab session for editing and support, giving them a little bit more time to work through and ask me questions and ask you questions about content or topic, or us together. And then sometimes we do have an in-class final film viewing. It's optional, obviously, but a lot of times students do want to share what they've created. And through all of this, I do try to highlight that these projects are a critical skill in modern day, work a lot of the times. Even if it's not part of a job, having these types of skills can be a benefit for a possible employee. And then as we're working through looking for public domain, copyright-free images, video, sound, fair use guidelines for copyrighted materials. So we can use some copyrighted materials, but understanding what that means in education. And then also ensuring that you have an expectation for a bibliography and how you want those media resources listed for submission. And then for a possible semester schedule, again, some of these aren't relevant for every class, but the intro training, draft script due, storyboard due, equipment and interview training, editing training, and that should be scheduled just prior to editing. So I wouldn't recommend an editing training and then students aren't actually going to be editing anything for a month, because they will forget how to use that program. So we usually like to partner that up pretty close. And then a draft clip due, or in-class critique, possibly an open work session, and then the final project due. And so all of these touch points, some of them you don't have to grade necessarily. You may not grade the storyboard, but you're requiring them to submit it. And what this allows is it allows them to scaffold and work through the project and sort of stumble if they do have or questions or whatnot when they need to discuss it with you for looking at what the focus of the topic and the project will be, or technological elements as well from the academic technology side, and then some of these are in between with best practices. And so finally, these are just, two last things that we'll end with. So these are things that we'll discuss with our students. Students, the do list, reverse engineer your timeline so you follow those due dates and time constraints, kind of what we just showed you. Keeping the audience purpose in mind. Updating your storyboard as things change. Again, like if they're working on an interview and they suddenly have all this new information that someone brought them, like thinking about how they're going to adapt that. So adaptation and flexibility is a part of this project, because things might change as they work through, and that's healthy, and that's really helping them learn and become a master of this topic. So and then reach out early to ask for help. I'm always available, and so I stress this in all the sessions, that I'm here for them. I'm here to have one-on-one consultations. And then the don't just jump into shooting before thinking about it. Occasionally students will go on, like I said, a field trip, and they just need to go get footage and they don't have the full idea. But then I just tell them to shoot everything that they can that could possibly be relevant. But really it's better to have some sort of guiding document outline that they can follow. Don't use a structure that sounds interesting over something that's effective, because you really need to make sure that the viewer gets something out of this. Don't skip your storyboarding. You really do need to align images and the topic and the story so that we have a compelling narrative. And then don't get you're going to get frustrated maybe, but don't stall out or let that slow you down. We can work together and we'll get you back on track. So that is my general overview of a video project. I know it was a lot because there was a little bit of everything, both what I show students and things for faculty to think about. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, though. I want you to just, talk with us. We're happy to brainstorm and really just find what fits for you. So please do email us and reach out, and earlier the better. Before semester's the best time, so we can also find a lab time and fit it into our schedule and your schedule. So thank you so much for listening and watching, and we'll talk to you soon.